Sitting here today with Dr. Joslyn Ahlgren, who was Teacher of the Year for the 2015-2016 academic year. Dr. Ahlgren teaches applied physiology and kinesiology, and she's here to tell us a little bit about what she does to bring her classroom to life. Can you tell us a little bit about what you teach and your philosophy on teaching?
So the two primary courses that I teach are anatomy and physiology. I also teach a fitness assessment and exercise prescription class. Other courses that I teach pretty regularly or off and on would be things like exercise physiology, graduate level fitness assessments. I also now teach two new courses that I've developed in the last year. Functional musculoskeletal anatomy. I think we just changed that name to kinetic anatomy, but it's basically a kinesiology course, kind of heavily emphasizing anatomy, and then a teaching experience course for my undergraduate teaching assistants. My overall teaching philosophy is that students should work really hard for what they're getting, and mostly that's because when they work really hard for it, they actually get to keep the content. When you take classes where you just go in and you kind of check your boxes and do what you got to do and then spit it all out on the exam, at the end of the term, there are things at the beginning of the term that you don't even remember doing. I can look at my transcript as an undergrad and see classes that I have no idea that I actually took. Like, I do not remember taking those classes. And it's because I did what a lot of students do. I did what I had to do. I spit it out on the exam and there it went. So I really generate my courses and develop them and design them in such a way that students get to keep what they learn in my course so that they can go out and actually use it. I try really hard to make my courses really focused on applying information and transferring information to novel scenarios so that whatever it is you're learning, you'll actually be able to do something with it. I don't consider my courses to be courses in knowledge dissemination. Like, this is not an information gathering session. It's actually learning how to use that information. Students have Google, they have every kind of internet resource at their fingertips. They don't need me to feed them information. They need me to show them how to use it. So I really try hard in terms of a teaching philosophy to do that.
That's wonderful. That reminds me of a Wadsworth quote that education is not about filling buckets, but about lighting fires. And I really appreciate that philosophy.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you a little bit. I realize the topics that you teach are quite challenging for some, and I wondered how you approach those topics that were so challenging, and made them understandable for all.
So I think I'm just really lucky because the stuff that I teach is super fascinating, and I think that most students that come into my classrooms, whether they're online classrooms or face-to-face classrooms, generally have an appreciation for how interesting it is. And I tell all of my students, and especially anatomy and physiology courses, that this is probably the best science class they'll ever take because it applies to them, it applies to every person they know, their parents, their lovers, their children, everybody. And the fact that they get to apply it across the board pretty much means they get to keep this information because they'll use it. So I think I just ended up really fortunate in that I get to teach really cool material. But I think also, you know, I go to teaching meetings and I hear faculty complaining a lot about how students can't do critical thinking, that they're just horrible at critical thinking. But I don't often hear them talking about how to address the issue. And so one of the things that I really focus on in my courses to try and help students do the critical thinking aspect of these more challenging courses, or courses that can be challenging for students, and they're also really high volume courses. We cover a lot of material in anatomy and physiology, and I think that makes it a little challenging as well. So I really try to address the deficit in critical thinking by making them practice it. I tell students in my syllabus, and I tell them first day of class, when you are in a sport, when you're practicing to excel in that particular sport, if you're playing soccer, you're going to practice soccer moves. You're not going to go to the basketball court to practice. If you're in a course that's requiring a lot of critical thinking and transfer and application, that's how you have to study. You can't just make flashcards and turn them over, because that's only going to promote memorization. It's really not going to help you learn the information at a higher level. So I try to get students to do that, which can be hard because it's more time consuming and it's just not as straightforward as flipping over flashcards. So I try to encourage, I teach students how to do those types of things, how to snowball their notes in such a way that they accumulate information as they go, so they're not just studying all at the last minute. I show them how to use Google Images and just look things up and take an image that's in their slides, look at a different picture of it on Google while you're studying, so that you can transfer some of these concepts while you're studying. So that it's really not adding time to your study, but it's kind of adding an element of layering to your studying that will enhance what it is we're trying to accomplish at the outset. And I also really try to get students to engage with one another as well. You know, we talked about this a little bit earlier with foreign language, and that it's really important to have an actual audible vocal piece to that. And I try to encourage my students in anatomy and physiology especially to do that, because you know, you can say it the right way in your head all day long, but the second it comes out, it might not be right. Right? We can do this on paper as well. When you're reading over the word oligodendrocyte, if you look at that word and dread having to say it or pronounce it, you're going to skip over it when you're studying, and then on the exam you're not really going to connect with that word, and so it makes it more challenging for you to really understand what it is if you don't actually face it and say it and try. So engagement with classmates, I think, is also a really key component to kind of getting over the hurdle of the challenge. And I think that working with groups is really important for students too, because they can really help each other, right? Peer learning is a real thing. You know, I can say it all day long, your peer can say it 2 words different, and light bulb goes off. And you get that interaction. You know, in your head you might be studying going, yes, I got it, I got it, I got it. But if you're saying this out loud and the person sitting next to you goes, wait, what? Then you have to stop. You have to explain it. Maybe that wasn't right. Maybe it was right and they just didn't understand the way you said it. So it really facilitates deeper learning and the ability to communicate that, which is one of our course objectives. In all of our courses we have a communication piece. So I think it helps. I've been teaching this type of material since about 1999, 2000, so a little while. And I feel like every single time I teach this same class, I get something new out of it. Even if it's 1 or 2 little nuggets, it's something that I personally am like, whoo, that's awesome. Or it's something that I can now facilitate better teaching with. You know, if that's something that I learned that my students struggle with, now I'm like, yes, now I can, you know, bypass that and teach it a different way, or utilize this other really cool resource that students can now get something out of. So for me, I think part of my enthusiasm is the fact that I really enjoy learning it. I like relearning it. And I really, really like how appreciative students are. Like they really see the value in what I'm teaching, and I can see it on their faces. And for my online students, when I can't see it on their faces, I can kind of visualize what they might be looking at. You know, in my lecture videos for my online courses, when I'm doing my lecture videos, I am literally thinking, you know, on the little screen, there's like a dolphin or a gorilla face or something. I mean, you don't talk to like a class of students. I'm extroverted, so when I'm in front of 300 people, I like feed off of that energy. And certainly if you're in a, you know, a camera studio, you don't have that, right? If you're lecturing to 2 cute penguins, it's just a different feel. But I really do still see faces of students going, what? Whoa! Like I see that, and I have seen it so many times in a lecture hall that like I kind of channel that a little bit when I'm doing my lecture videos. And it really is just that cool. And so for me to get to explain it and to visualize students being just like jaw dropped, it's pretty cool. Our undergraduate teaching assistants actually enroll in a course. It's called Teaching Experience in APK. And I developed this course about a year ago. Our first offering for the course was last spring, so spring 2015. And during that time, so I've generated this course that actually any of the instructors in my department can utilize for their specific courses. So the overall generalized course outcomes are kind of generalized across the topic. You know, being able to present lecture material, being able to meet individually with students, being able to help generate exam questions, things that any of our TAs would be expected to do coming out of a teaching experience course. But then each individual instructor can make those very specific to their course. So for example, for my anatomy course, my undergraduate TAs are either lab TAs or lecture TAs. So in my flipped anatomy class, my lecture TAs come to class with me. They help me generate practice problems. They help me develop the class activities and the class discussion prompts that we do in class. So I meet with those students once every week or every 2 weeks, and we talk about things. We hash through what's going to work, what's not going to work, what's going to benefit students, what topics do they really need extra help on. Should we draw this in class or should we draw this individually and then come back together? So they give me that kind of feedback from a student perspective that really helps facilitate the learning in that setting. For my lab TAs, they attend the lab sections, they assist the graduate TA who's in charge of basically teaching the class, but it's really helpful because there's an extra pair of hands in class now. And the other thing that has been really, really helpful about having undergraduate TAs in our anatomy labs is that the students now have an extra opportunity to try and verbally communicate some of these things. Students will not come to my office hours to practice for their communication assessment. So in our class, one of our assessments is directly a communication assessment where you have to teach a model, right? And so we check off the box how many you got right, how many you got wrong, what was your face like, you know, was it professional? There's a communication piece to it, and they will not come to my office hours and practice. No matter how many times they say, hey, if anybody wants to practice this, come to my office hours, they won't do it. But they take advantage of our undergraduate TAs, and those TAs really make themselves available for that kind of sounding board, which is fantastic because these are excellent students. They made an A in my course, they aced it, they nailed it, they're interested in teaching, and they can give a lot better feedback to these students in a much lower intimidating type of setting. So it's been really beneficial. Certainly we can have more availability in our open study lab times, so if I have more hands on deck, I can leave my study lab open for a lot longer, which means better accessibility for more students. If I have a student that's willing to stay in my open lab in the evening hours, then students who work during the day or who have classes during the day can come at a later hour to my open study lab. So it really has increased access to our study lab for a group of students, and having somebody in the study lab, not just having it open while labs are going on, but having a person there who the students can then ask questions of and, you know, get reliable answers from. It's also been really helpful to me in terms of generating grading rubrics for some of the assignments that I make, getting feedback from my undergraduate TAs as to what is really helpful for students, what really matters, how should I, you know, grade attendance in a flipped classroom. I had 2 weeks of discussion with my undergrad TAs regarding how we should implement the flipped scenario in our class. I spent an entire semester with my undergrad TAs. We meet weekly, all of our undergrad TAs and we meet weekly and we discuss different topics. So sometimes we talk about internationalization in classrooms, or students with disabilities, or anything that could possibly involve teaching. We talk about generating a syllabus, generating effective types of exam questions, fair but challenging. So we have them practice this. It really is a teaching course. It's not just, I need your help in my lab. It really is intended to make them effective teachers, and they get to practice it while they're going, which is really fun too. I mean, we all get mad kicks out of it. We all sit around a conference table or an anatomy desk, and we just geek out on science teaching, which is very cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and so, you know, for them, for the undergrad TAs who get to participate in this, I feel like they probably get a lot out of it, and they all seem to be enjoying it. So, and they all are kind of going in different places. Some of them want to end up in academia. Some of them are, you know, pre-health bound. They're going to be doctors, or they're going to be nurses or PTs. But they all resoundingly really like getting a better grasp of the content, and they know they're going to get that through teaching. And then they're really working on their presentation and oral communication skills, their interaction skills. I think they're really learning a lot about being a good learner as well.
Agreed. That is such an essential piece.
Yeah.
Learning how to learn.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't think I learned how to learn effectively until I was probably 3 years into my undergrad. I would scribble down notes furiously. I would transcribe any course I would go to because I thought that's what it would take for me to learn that content. It was not until I was probably a junior or senior in undergrad that I kind of like sat back and said, you know what? I'm smart enough to pay attention in class and not have to transcribe everything that I could probably remember some of that. I don't actually have to write this down. And if I have a question, you know what? I have a textbook. I could go look it up. I don't have to transcribe every syllable that my teacher is saying. And so I try to translate that for my students as well. And I talk so fast, like so fast. And when I get more excited, it just gets faster. And I will look out sometimes into my class of 200 students and I'll see them all face down. I'm like, what are you doing? Put your pencils down. You're not going to be able to write this down fast enough. So just don't try. Just stop, listen. It's all on the slide. Like, you don't have to write this down. It's all in this picture. As long as you know what this picture means, you don't have to write any of this. So that's a challenge, getting them to stop transcribing my class, but I think it's helpful. I don't know that I have an actual golden nugget, but I think that, can I give you 2 golden nuggets?
You can give me 2.
I'm going to give you 2. So one is that I put my success tips in my syllabus and I review those with my students on day 1. Like, I don't expect students to actually read my syllabus. I think they should, but I'm intelligent enough to know they don't. But I do go over this with them. So I tell students outright, if you want to be successful in this course and if you want to really do your best, here's a list of things that you need to do. And these are things that when students are struggling in my class and they come to my office hours after the first or second exam of not doing so well, these are my golden nuggets that I give to them. And I publish those in my syllabus so they can start doing those on day 1. And then when they come to talk to me, I will say, did you go over the success tips? Have you started implementing those things? Which are very different depending on which course I'm teaching. But I publish them in all my syllabi, my success tips, and tips for staying on top of things. And if they say yes, then I'm like, okay, then let's get a little bit more nitty gritty. And if they say, no, I haven't really done that, they'll give me an excuse why, and I'm like, okay, you gotta do that. But my second golden nugget kind of is a tangent off of that, in that a lot of times they will give me a reason why they didn't want to do that. You know, I'll say to a student who's struggling in physiology, are you working with a study group? Do you have a group of people that you meet with regularly to go over those critical thinking questions that I've published for you? No, I hate working with groups. You know, they give me lots of reasons. And I'll say to them, there's a reason why I asked you to work in a group. And so transparency in everything that's in your course, I think, is really vital for students to buy in. Students really, really have to, when you're teaching a challenging course and or a voluminous course, buy into whatever it is you're asking them to do. If I ask students to go on their own and look something up, they have to in their head go, is it going to be worth my time? And if you're not telling them why you're having them do that, they're not going to buy in well. Some students will just buy in regardless. They're your front row students. You could tell them to go lick a frozen lampshade and they're going to go do it because you're the teacher. But there's like everybody from row 2 and back that are gonna go, it's ridiculous, why would I do that? I'm not doing that. But if you tell them why, if you tell there's some valuable lesson in that, you might capture a few more of those people, maybe even the majority of those people. So I think it's really key to be very, very transparent in why you are having students do certain things. If there's a reason, I have a class and there's 2 exams. There's a midterm and there's a comprehensive final. And I don't typically, in most classes, have that few exams. But the intention of the course is to train students for certification-style exams. So I tell students that from day 1. There's a reason why you only have 2 exams in this class, and they're very comprehensive. They're big, broad strokes of exam questions, because that's what your certification exam is going to look like, and this is how we train for that specifically. And they're fine with it at that point. If I did that in my anatomy class, it would not go so well. It's not good for that style of learning. But I think really being clear with your students helps them buy in.